My husband's been going on these business trips, and I'll be honest with you guys, he hasn't touched me romantically in weeks, and I just know something's up because this is totally not like him. I'm going to get to the very bottom of this one way or the other, and what I find out might be kind of disturbing to some people. Let's get into it. My younger sister Ursula is currently married to my husband Ronald, and the bizarre part is that she equally has a husband who's faithful to her. I know, it makes no sense, so let me start from the background, just to give you a better understanding. I'm older than Ursula by 2 years, but she got married before me. Some 2 years ago, I believe. Her husband's a rich young engineer who's a year younger than her, and though they seem to be happily married, Ursula's yet to give birth to a child. This is not an issue for the couple. The marriage of my sister to her husband Joshua came as a surprise. Because of the small age difference, Ursula lived in a wild life in school. Well, had lots of escapades, unlike me, who lost my virginity on my wedding night. The day she brought her husband home to introduce to the family, I asked her privately if she was not bothered by the age difference, and she claimed it was just a number. I dragged the conversation further because she had always talked about her lover, and never was there a time when she mentioned she was older. Ursula noted that she had ditched her previous lover the moment Joshua came her way. My turn for marriage came 2 years later, and I did the needful, which was calling my family together to show them my fiancé, and I don't know what the issue was, but Ursula did not seem to like my would-be husband very much, and she tried dissuading me from getting married to him based on him not being, quote, rich enough. I immediately shut her down. I would not let her faulty mentality decide how I was going to live. My husband Ronald got wind of what my sister was trying to do, and he resented her ever since. We got married, and I was the major income earner in the home. It did not matter because I remained supportive of my husband and never tried to lord over him. I quickly observed something right from the first day that we got intimate. As husband and wife, Ronald had a very high libido, which was difficult for me to keep up with. If his libido, going over the roof, was the only thing, then that would have been all right. But my husband seemed to somewhat distance each time that we had coitus. It was like he was holding back. I felt he was not being open enough, and that was not how I wanted my marriage to be. Not in the beginning phase, so I decided to address the issue. I confronted Ronald about it, and he told me that he was reserved because he did not know what I would make of him if he got expressive. I reminded him that we're married, and where else was he supposed to be expressive if not in his marriage? Rather than let my husband feel frustrated in our marriage, I decided to play the encouraging wife, so I asked him to be himself the next time we were intimate. And that was my biggest mistake. I can't begin to explain my experience because you might think me to be dirty. It was terrible. I felt more like a toy than a human being throughout the whole process, and my body ached all over. Ronald could tell I was in pain, and he tried to comfort me. He opened up about his dark desires. He handed his phone over to me, and it had these videos of different kinds of stuff, which I definitely cannot mention here. He said the reason he watched those videos and, had fun with himself was that he was scared about how I would react if I learned of the kind of things that gave him satisfaction. Let me be truthful. I was scared. It did not make any sense to me why somebody would derive satisfaction from engaging in the things that I saw. The things in the videos were even worse than what he's done to me. I absconded from intimacy with my husband because I needed to heal, and I did not plan on reliving that kind of experience even after I got healed. There was tension in our home, and it gave me concern, because on one hand I was supposed to be loving and submissive, who did her best to please her husband, but on the other hand I was equally supposed to preserve my life, and submitting myself to the dark desires of my husband was a threat of my life. I did not want to start bringing the whole world into the issues I was facing in my marriage, so I turned to the only one whom I could talk to, Ursula. I met with my younger sister and told her I was experiencing some level of difficulties in my marriage. Ursula was focused and attentive until I told her what the issue was. She bursted out laughing for about 5 minutes before telling me not to die over my husband's stupid bedroom fetishes. She advised that my husband and I come to a compromise where I would try my best to meet his high demands, but the weird stuff should be thrown out the window. According to Ursula, if he had issues letting go of those desires, then it would be best if he sought a bit of therapy. I sat down with my husband later on to resolve the issues that we were having. I started by telling him it was my sister's idea, and he absolutely flared up. He was angry at the fact that I was, going to bring my sister into our issue, when I knew directly that she had already expressed her dislike for me. Besides, he noted that she would waste no time in telling everybody that he was a freak, and I tried calming Ronald down, but he just stormed off. I called Ursula to tell her what happened, and she just suggested that I give my husband a bit of space so he could cool off. Ursula invited me to stay at her place for a few days, after which my husband would have been a bit reasonable. Ursula's husband, Joshua, was usually not at home. He always had a site to oversee at different locations from where they lived, and this meant he was constantly traveling. Staying with Ursula helped me, and she suggested that she spoke to my husband on my behalf. Her suggestion was not okay by me because I knew they both did not want to see eye to eye. She, however, asked me to trust her, and I did. Ursula visited my husband, and to my amazement, he came looking for me the next day and took me home. He apologized for being selfish and unreasonable, and said he was willing to come, to go with the compromise and even attend therapy. Things began moving smoothly between my husband and I. We had a consistent sex life without the fetish stuff while he went to therapy. I got a better job, and about 2 months later, it required that I would need to relocate to another city. Relocating would mean my husband would have to join me, and it did seem like a problem when I thought about it because my husband's job was not a consistent, and it did not pay well. Well, I think he was a security guard at a firm. I planned that we would look for a better job opportunity for him, the moment we moved. I told Ronald about it, but contrary to my expectations, he did not want us to leave. His excuse was that a friend of his was drafting up a plan to land him a really good job, and the relocation thing would absolutely ruin it for him. How could he be talking about making plans for a job when he turned down one that would have paid better? Yeah, I spoke with my sister's husband, and he had used his influence to secure Ronald a position in his firm, to work as a hired technician of some sort, but my husband had turned it down. All the same, I tried making Ronald see that a bird at hand was worth more than $1 million in the bush. I'd gotten a better job offer which would be beneficial to us, and the wise thing to do was obviously relocate, since he practically brought a little to the table. Ronald accused me of being selfish by only thinking about my career and not his prospective job, which according to him would be more lucrative than every job he's ever had in the past. He then suggested I relocate alone to another city while he stayed back. The plan was I would come and visit every weekend. His plan did not make sense. We're living in a rented apartment, which I cover the bill, and I'd probably rent an apartment in the new city where I was going to do the same, so that would be me foolishly piling up bills for myself. Besides, our marriage was in its infancy stage, and putting such a distance between us was not the best idea. The situation was becoming something else, and to prevent further escalation, I accepted my husband's term. I resigned from my current job at the time and relocated. I tried keeping up with the weekend visitation thing, but my visits soon became twice a month, and even at that, I observed that the fire which my marriage had before was dying. It seemed as though my husband was less and less interested in seeing me. I'd say about 2 months after the new job, I decided that I've made a mistake. Yes, I was earning higher than my previous job, but it was costing me my marriage. I quit, without thinking twice. I appeared at my home unannounced, and Ronald was surprised to hear that I've quit my job. He was not happy that I've decided this without talking it over with him. I explained to him that my decision was based on the fact that I wanted to put our marriage before my career. I even gave him what was supposed to be good news, and my previous company was willing to take me back. Ronald did not make a fuss, but I had a hunch that he was uncomfortable with my presence being here. This was further proof that I needed to quickly save my marriage. My husband met me a few days later and said that he thought about taking up the job offer at Joshua's construction company, rather than sitting idle. My sister reached out to her husband, and it was settled. Ronald would be away on some days, mostly on the weekends, and I was happy that my husband had a job, but I was sad, in a way. You see, my husband had barely touched me ever since I came home, and with the addition of his job, I felt like there would be no space for me in his life. Ronald's job began, and it was like, basically I expected. He had zero time for me, and we would work twice a week, go for therapy, and go on field trips during the weekends. It went on for 3 months, and I was now the one begging my husband for coitus, and he would always have an excuse to decline my request. What I found most surprising was the fact that he was the one with such a high sex drive, so it made no sense that he could just stay comfortably away for 3 months without wanting it. I decided to spice things up. I came up with a plan. To suddenly pull Ronald out of his work for one day with the news of an emergency at the house. The plan was to get him to come rushing home, only for him to meet a new version of his wife. Yes, I wanted to do some of that stuff with him. If that's what it would get to take his attention, I'd do it. I reached out to Joshua and wanted to tell him that I've prepared a surprise for my husband and needed him to help me lie to get Ronald home. But I knew I could not do that because Joshua would not want to jeopardize his job because of a silly prank, so I lied. I told Joshua that there's an emergency at the house and they need the attention of my husband, to my shock and dismay. He said my husband was not part of the crew that went for the field job. It was on a weekend, and my husband had told me, just like other times, that he was leaving for the field trip. I was still trying to make sense of what happened when Joshua further informed me that my husband's work days with the company did not include weekends. I was shocked. Shocked by the fact that my husband lied. He had been away for a whole day and would not be back till the next week, and this had been a routine ever since he began to work. Where has he been spending his days? I waited for Ronald to come home a few days later, and after I welcomed him, I asked how his work had gone. I was still trying to convince myself that there's some logical explanation why the company Ronald claimed he spent his weekends working for said they did not know his whereabouts. Ronald looked me dead in the eyes and said that the weekend was the most stressful time for him so far. He gave me a story of how he almost sustained great bodily injury while trying to operate a machine. I stood looking at the liar without saying a word. The words of Ronald to me that day showed that he had been lying to me all along. Even though I had proof that Ronald lied, I could not accuse him of infidelity, but the signs were there. It now made sense that my husband, who had such a high sexual drive, would just stay away from me for months. He's probably getting it from somewhere else. While I felt I was doing something wrong in my home, I decided that I was going to investigate the matter myself, so I waited for the next weekend when he would be going on this field trip. I did not even bother contemplating sex with him while I plotted my plan. He disgusted me from a mile away. The weekend soon rolled around, and I was sure my husband had been looking forward to it. As usual, he was to go with the only car we had. A car that, guess what, I bought with my hard-earned money and only allowed him to use it because I wanted to be supportive and a sensitive wife. I willingly let him take the car, but unknown to my husband, I went ahead to install a nice little GPS tracker in it. This would help me know his real-time location. We kissed goodbye and he drove off. I froze when my husband's real-time location pulled up to my sister's house. What was he doing? I did not want to immediately jump to that conclusion, so I waited for hours to see if perhaps he branched at my sister's place just to pick something up or maybe deliver a message. His real-time location remained the same even at 5 p.m., so I called him to ask how work was going and all. Ronald told me that work was stressful, as usual, and the truth hit him in the face. My sister's house was his construction firm, and I did not say or act in any way that would spook him. I just asked him to be careful before cutting the call. So, I called my sister 30 minutes later to tell her that my husband, just like hers, was away working and I was preparing to come stay at her place for the weekend. I told her I would be at her place in the matter of minutes, and this was nothing more than a lie. I just wanted to see her reaction, which would further prove my suspicion. Ursula immediately freaked out. She said it's not convenient for her at this moment, and she's making plans to go to a friend's place for the weekend, since her husband was not around. I knew at that moment my sister was sleeping with my husband. Ursula, whom I know would have welcomed the idea of me coming to spend time at her place. Do you know, see why I said that my younger sister is married to my husband? Yeah. It's already late, so I'll be going to meet with my brother-in-law Joshua tomorrow to disclose the unfortunate news of our spouse's infidelity. I don't know how this would play out, but I hope I can keep my emotions in check till I get to the root of the matter and decide which direction my life will take. Update number 1. Hey guys. I'm just coming back from my visit to Ursula's husband, and he is the one who needed to put his emotions in check. Here I was, thinking that ladies are the fragile ones when it comes to heartbreak. I showed up at my husband's construction firm to meet with Joshua. He was surprised that I turned up unannounced and asked what the issue was. I did not waste time exchanging pleasantries. I told him there was a problem and started narrating the reason for previous calls which I had made when I wanted him to pass a message to Ronald. I explained to Joshua the exact reason I've been issuing with my husband, especially in the bedroom. Joshua listened as I explained my sexual frustration, and he offered to speak with Ronald on my behalf, but I noted that my problem was from his home. He was surprised at the words that I just uttered from my mouth, and I told him I suspect my husband was cheating on me with his wife. Joshua looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. He then asked that I not make accusations without a bit of proof. So I pulled up my phone and called my husband in his presence. Ronald did not immediately pick up my call, and I hated to call 3 times before he answered. His voice was like he had been working. He was working all night, but not at the company site. I asked how his work was going, and he said it was stressful. I asked about Joshua, and my husband said he was equally on site working. The moment my husband said it, I turned to look at Joshua, and he was shocked. My husband claimed to be working with him at the moment. I played the part of a fool by asking him to care before terminating the call. Joshua, he was surprised and angry, but he did not see it as enough reason to implicate his wife. He tried being defensive by saying it's clear my husband was a liar, but I should understand the gravity of the accusation I'm making. I immediately showed him the real-time location of my vehicle, according to the GPS tracker, which I installed, and he began sweating when he saw the address was his home. He wanted to call his wife to ask if my husband was with her, but I stopped him. I had to make him call her after an hour to act like he was just checking up on her. My brother-in-law, Joshua, called my sister and said everything at home was great. She even said that she missed him. I could see Joshua's face squeeze because he knew that she was lying. The moment they were done with that call, I informed my brother-in-law that his wife had told me yesterday that she would be going to a friend's place to spend the weekend when I feigned an interest in spending the weekend with her. Joshua sat on the ground with tears streaming from his eyes as he asked what had he done to deserve this, and what had he not done for my sister? Well, I understood the fact that he was hurt, but seeing a man in the same situation as me cry when I was standing strong was not attractive. I told him the best way was to properly investigate the matter before deciding the right course of action, which began hatching a plan right then and there, but I don't know if Joshua has the emotional stamina required to pull it off. Update number 2. This has been 5 days since my last update, and my husband has returned from his little field trip. Joshua did not immediately come back. We knew our spouse would need another weekend before they would see each other, and I monitored my husband closely, and besides the times when he went to work, he only went out during his therapy days to see his therapist. I was surprised to still discover that the therapist was still my sister Ursula. Back when I discovered my husband's dark secret, and Ursula played the mediator, she had been the one who promised to introduce him to a really good therapist, and I never followed him to one of the sessions. Otherwise, I would have known that my sister was the one giving my husband these therapeutic sessionings. I feel like a fool when I remember that I'd paid good money for these sessions, and there were days when I would even give my husband money for gas. Not only did my husband just play me, he made me pay him while at it. I asked my husband about his therapy session, and he noted they were great. I then told him that I was glad he's now on talking terms with my sister, as I never imagined my sister of all people would be the one to, get rid of this tension that was brewing between us at the time. Ronald said my sister apologized for looking down on him, and that was why there was no more rift between them. I acted as though I was pleased with the situation of things, but I was curious to properly understand what was going on. If they had started sleeping together from the therapy scan, then it meant that they've gotten familiar before then. It just didn't make much sense. Joshua came back that weekend, and my husband did not go on any field trips. He claimed they were not working that weekend, but I knew it was just because his lover's husband was around. So I suggest to my husband that we invited him and my sister to our home for lunch. He tried making up an excuse about us letting Joshua rest with his family, and I was not stupid. It was clear he was avoiding a situation where I would have them all gathered because his field work cover could easily be blown. I, however, insisted that we were only to extend the invite, and they decided to honor it or not. We did, and guess what? They both honored the invitation. My sister did not want to attend, but her husband persuaded her. I thanked my sister for the part that she had played in trying to save my marriage, and she said she was only doing what she thought to do as a sister. While we were at it, my brother-in-law and I did our best to observe the body language between them, but they did a splendid job in hiding their little secrets, but you could tell they felt uneasy. Joshua and I had agreed we would not ask any questions that could spook them, so we avoided talking about my husband's work and all. My sister and her husband left my house earlier today with her, and my husband feeling like we knew nothing. Well, I can guarantee you that my next update will be quite dramatic, as the cheater will be exposed. Update number 3. Hey guys, I seriously underestimated the type of drama I expected would be updated here. I told my husband 3 days after my sister invited us that I wanted to stay with my parents for a few days, but I could pop in any time. He was expected in support of it. Joshua, on the other hand, would be going away for the weekend, and the two lovebirds, my husband and sister, were looking forward to another weekend of escapades, or should I say, coitus. What they did not know was that Joshua and I have been trying to access their phones to see the content of their messages. The lunch which we had taken place in my house was a ploy for Josh to take his wife out so that the folks he hired could install cameras as hidden places in his home. I was not able to access my husband's phone because he was super cautious. Joshua, however, was able to go through Ursula's phones, and he saw the WhatsApp chat between Ursula and my husband that showed they knew about each other way before I brought him as my fiancé to introduce the family. We discovered from their messages my sister was dating Ronald, but refused to get married to him because he was not rich. She, however, did not want me to get married to him, and that's why she tried dissuading me from getting married to him via the derogatory statements which she made. Joshua showed me the chat of my sister asking Ronald to stay away from me, but Ronald, who wanted to get back at her for dumping him, insisted that he would go on with the marriage. Well, it was then when my sister learned about my marital frustration that she decided to rekindle an old flame with my husband. My sister, who was a dirty dog, like my husband, had no difficulty satisfying his dark desires, and it was as if, what she did with him when they dated was some sort of therapist. Wow. I went away for a few days while Joshua went to work on the same day too. Our spouses immediately went to work with Ronald, going over to spend some days at Joshua's place. Joshua and I were not too far away. We were watching a live feed of both of them kissing, and Joshua lost it. He stormed out of the house and began furiously knocking at the door. I was right behind him to avoid things getting out of hand, and Ursula opened the door and Joshua stared at both her and my husband. They had not even gotten enough time to clean up, and it was clear something was going on. Honestly speaking, what happened next was not planned. I did not anticipate it, and Joshua and I simultaneously rushed at my husband and sister. He took my husband down with ease, even though my husband was older, and I guess his bottled-up anger was someone converting strength while giving my sister the beating of her life. I had to let go of my sister and her swollen face when I observed that my husband's face was bloodied, and I could see 2 of his teeth on the floor. I struggled to get Joshua off of my husband, and I even sustained a minor injury to my arm. My husband took advantage of my intervention by running away for his life. Joshua turned to my sister, who was equally making her way to the door for the fear of her life. Well, this drama occurred this afternoon, and Joshua would accompany me to see my parents tomorrow. Update number 4. I'm currently doing fine, even though I don't have a man in my life. After the saga at Josh's house, I had the locks of the door of my apartment changed, so my husband would not have access to absolutely anything, not even his clothing. Joshua and I went to my family's house the next day, and my sister was there. My parents, who had been trying to reach out to him ever since they saw their daughter Ursula with a swollen face, asked what the issue was. Joshua began telling them that they had been wronged by giving him a loose wife. He informed them about infidelity, and was something which he had not yet told them, and they were still in shock. He went ahead to tell them her lover was my husband. My parents looked at me to see if I was backing the claims of my brother-in-law, and I began showing them proof of my sister's wickedness. My parents were mad and had no clue what to do to Ursula. Ursula immediately started to run her mouth. She told her husband that it's been man enough in the bedroom, then she would not have sought the satisfaction in the arms of another man. Yeah, she's that type of woman, never satisfied. She then turned to me and said I was supposed to be grateful that she had used her assets to keep my marriage together, as she did the thing that I was not willing to do. I lashed out at her and we started to fight. My parents separated us and she continued just running her mouth while I went outside to call the police. I got back into the house to find my parents telling my sister that she was to move out and never reach out to my family again. I told Ursula she would not have to look for a home because I was getting her arrested for conniving my husband to defraud me by making me pay for therapeutic sessions which were false. It was then, when my sister got arrested and was being taken away by the cops, that she began to beg. Joshua already started the divorce proceedings and he would divorce her while she's being charged. My husband's currently wanted by the cops and a manhunt has been put out for his name. I'll divorce him the moment the police have him in custody. It's been 2 weeks now and Joshua's been trying to get close to me. I don't think, however, that anything can work out between the both of us. So Ursula's going to the slammer, and it looks like Ronald's on the run. I mean, he's a fugitive. They have a manhunt out for him, and I can only wonder what these two thought that they could possibly be doing without getting caught. I mean, we're talking about 2 people that were relying on OP and their significant other, and they're cheating behind their back. It was the craziest story. But I want to know what you think about the confrontation towards the end of the story when we learned about Joshua and Ronald going at it, and some of them missing a couple teeth. Let me know if you know about anybody who's ever been in a similar situation. Maybe you've been in that situation. I want to hear about it. Guys, thank you for joining me today. My name's Mr. Reddito, and I narrate stories every single day. So if you want to be a part of these daily videos, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and just remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.